Sarah Mitchell woke up early every morning to the soft sound of birds singing outside her small farmhouse. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden light over the fields of tall grass and crops that stretched out around her home. She loved this peaceful time of day, when the world felt calm and full of promise. The farm was her sanctuary, a place where she could leave behind the noise and worries of the past and focus on the simple life she had built for herself and her son, Jamie. Her days started before sunrise and often ended after sunset. Sarah's routine was full of hard work, feeding the animals, fixing fences, tending to the garden, and making sure everything was running smoothly. It was tiring, but it was also rewarding. There was a deep satisfaction in working with her hands and seeing the fruits of her labor grow. The farm wasn't just a job, it was her home and the future she wanted to create for Jamie. Sarah had moved to this rural part of the country several years ago after leaving a very different life behind. Few people in the nearby town knew about her past. She rarely spoke about it, and she kept it carefully hidden. Before coming here, Sarah had been a soldier, a Green Beret sniper, one of the best in her unit. She had served her country in dangerous places, far from this quiet farm, but now she was just a mother, and this simple life was what mattered most. Jamie was only 8 years old, full of energy and curiosity. He loved helping his mother with small chores around the farm and was fascinated by the animals. His favorite was a gentle brown horse named Bella, who seemed to understand him better than anyone else. Sarah worked hard to give Jamie a normal childhood, away from the harsh realities she had known before. She wanted him to grow up feeling safe, loved, and free. Every morning, after feeding the animals, Sarah made breakfast for Jamie. They ate, together at the old wooden kitchen table, talking about what the day might bring. Sometimes Jamie would ask about the world beyond the farm, and Sarah would smile, telling him stories that were full of adventure, but always gentle enough for a child. She wanted to protect his innocence as long as she could. Despite the calm of the farm, Sarah was always alert. Her years in the military had trained her to notice the smallest details, any sound that seemed out of place or a shadow where there shouldn't be one. She didn't want to worry Jamie, so she kept her watchfulness private. The farm was a place where she could live quietly, but she was ready for anything. Sarah's neighbors were kind but kept their distance. The town was small, and most people were busy with their own lives. Sarah liked it that way. She didn't need many friends. She only needed Jamie and the piece of the land around them. Occasionally, she would sell some eggs and vegetables at the local market, and that was enough to keep her connected without losing her privacy. The farmhouse itself was modest but sturdy. It had been built by a family long ago, and Sarah had fixed it up with her own hands over the years. The walls were thick, keeping the house warm in winter and cool in summer. The porch was her favorite place to sit on warm evenings, watching the sunset and listening to the sounds of the countryside. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine the future, one where Jamie could grow up strong and free, just like the wide-open fields around them. One morning, as Sarah was walking the fence line checking for broken posts, she noticed something strange. There were tire tracks leading onto the property that hadn't been there before. The earth was soft from recent rain, and the tracks looked fresh. Someone had driven a vehicle near her barn late at night. Her heart tightened. She didn't know who it was or what they wanted, but instinct told her to be cautious. She spent the day watching from a distance, trying not to show her concern to Jamie. She explained that sometimes visitors came to see farms, and maybe it was nothing. But deep down, she knew this was different. The peaceful life she had built felt threatened in a way she hadn't felt since her days in the army. Sarah realized she might have to prepare for something she hoped would never come, danger to her home and her son. Evening fell, and Sarah stood on the porch, her eyes scanning the tree line beyond the fields. The wind carried the smell of pine and earth, but it also carried a quiet warning. She tightened her grip on the railing, remembering the discipline and skills she had learned long ago. The past she thought she had left behind was ready to meet her again. But this time, the fight was different. It was for the farm, for Jamie, and for the life she had finally found. As stars began to fill the night sky, Sarah felt a deep calm settle over her. No matter what came next, she was ready. She was not just a single mother running a farm. She was a trained soldier, a protector, and a woman who would do anything to keep her son safe. The quiet life on the farm was just the beginning of a story that would test her in ways she never expected. Since it's a long piece, I'll write the first part now and continue with the rest in the next messages. Sarah had barely slept the night after noticing the fresh tire tracks on her land. Every little sound made her heart race. The rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, even the distant hoot of an owl. Years of military training had taught her to be alert, to expect the unexpected, and she knew she couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The morning sun barely warmed the chilly air as Sarah moved quietly outside. She kept her movements slow and careful, watching every shadow and listening for any unusual noises. Her eyes scanned the fields and the edges of the forest that bordered her property. She knew the land well, every tree, every path, but now it felt different, as if it was hiding secrets. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who had been here last night? Were they just passing through? Or were they watching the farm for something? She thought about the valuables on the farm, but she had no money saved, no hidden stash. What could these strangers want? Her thoughts were interrupted when she spotted something in the distance. A figure moving quickly between the trees. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She crouched behind a fence post, blending into the shadows as the figure disappeared behind a cluster of bushes. Her heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She had been trained for moments like this. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed more signs. Broken branches near the garden, footprints in the soft earth around the barn. A strange vehicle parked just outside the property line, its engine never running but the tires leaving marks that told a story of late-night visits. Whoever these people were, they were not friendly visitors. Sarah decided to investigate quietly. She couldn't involve the police yet, not without proof. The rural police were slow to respond, and she wanted to protect Jamie from any worry. So she started setting simple traps and alarms around the farm. Wires stretched across paths, noisy cans tied to doors, and her own watchful eyes acting as the best defense. She also used her knowledge of surveillance, things she had learned as a Green Beret, to watch and learn about the strangers. From her bedroom window, she spotted a group of 3 men camping in the woods near the edge of her land. They were rough-looking, wearing dark clothes and talking in low voices. One of them had a scar running down his cheek, and Sarah immediately knew he was the leader. Sarah kept a safe distance but studied their movements. The men came closer to the farm each night, testing the fences, looking for weaknesses. They were not just thieves. They seemed desperate, planning something bigger. Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. She had dealt with dangerous men before, but never so close to home. Jamie noticed the change in his mother. She was more serious, quieter during the day, and sometimes she would stare into the distance, lost in thought. One afternoon, Jamie asked, "Mom, is everything okay? Why do you look worried?" Sarah smiled softly and ruffled his hair. "Everything is fine, Jamie. Sometimes grown-ups have to be careful to keep everyone safe. You just keep playing and helping with the animals, and I'll take care of the rest." But inside, Sarah's mind was racing. She couldn't let these men hurt her son or destroy the life they had built. She started planning more carefully, using every skill she had learned in the army. She cleaned and maintained her weapons, checked the traps, and reinforced the barn doors. She mapped out escape routes and safe places for Jamie to hide if things got worse. Despite the growing threat, Sarah tried to keep life normal for Jamie. She took him to the local school, helped him with homework, and made sure he still laughed and played. It was important to her that Jamie didn't grow up scared or confused. Sarah wanted him to trust that she could protect them both. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah heard a noise outside the farmhouse, a soft scraping sound near the back door. Her heart jumped. She grabbed her old hunting rifle, a weapon she had carried during her military missions but had kept hidden in the house. Moving silently, she crept toward the door. Peering through the window, she saw two of the men from the woods trying to pry the door open. They didn't notice her. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying her aim. She knew she had to stop them before they could come inside. With a quick, precise shot, she fired a warning bullet into the ground near their feet. The men froze, eyes wide with shock. Then, without waiting for another shot, they ran back into the woods, shouting orders to the third man who was waiting with a vehicle nearby. Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let fear take over. She knew this was just the beginning. After that night, Sarah's focus sharpened. The outlaws were no longer just strangers. They were a real and dangerous threat. She couldn't wait for them to make a mistake. She had to be ready to act first. The local sheriff stopped by one afternoon. After hearing about the strange noises from a neighbor, Sarah spoke carefully, explaining what she had seen but leaving out the details of her past and her weapons. The sheriff nodded and promised to keep an eye on the area, but Sarah knew help would be slow. As days passed, the outlaws grew bolder. They damaged some of the farm equipment and tried to cut through the fences. Sarah's traps slowed them down, but the men were determined. They clearly believed the farm held something valuable, something worth the risk. Sarah's thoughts often drifted back to her army days. She remembered long nights watching enemy movements, making decisions that could mean life or death. Those memories made her strong. She wasn't just a single mother running a farm. She was a trained soldier ready to fight if needed. One afternoon, Sarah took Jamie out to the fields to teach him how to spot animals and understand the land. She wanted to share her love of nature with him, but she also used the time to teach him about being careful and aware. Jamie listened intently, asking questions about the birds and the small creatures that lived in the grass. Sarah smiled, proud of her son's curiosity, but inside she worried about the coming days. The outlaws were planning something bigger, and she had to be ready for anything. That night, as Jamie slept peacefully in his bed, Sarah sat by the window staring out into the dark woods. The men were still out there, somewhere in the shadows, watching and waiting. But Sarah was not afraid. She was ready to protect her home, her son, and the peaceful life she had worked so hard to build. Sarah had been watching the signs for days. The strange noises, the broken fences, the tire tracks. They all pointed to the fact that the outlaws were no longer just testing her defenses. They were preparing for something bigger. Her calm farm. Life was about to change, and she knew it. The night was dark and cold when the first real threat arrived. Sarah had spent the evening double-checking all her traps and securing her home. She had made sure that Jamie was asleep in his room, safe and out of harm's way. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the wind through the trees. Suddenly, from the shadows outside, Sarah heard the faint sound of footsteps moving carefully toward the barn. She stayed perfectly still, listening. Her heart beat steadily, a rhythm she had known well during her years in the army. She silently picked up her rifle and moved to a window that gave her a clear view of the barn. 3 men were creeping toward the barn, their movements slow and cautious. They carried tools, crowbars, knives, and small bags. Sarah's eyes narrowed. These were the outlaws who had been stalking her land for weeks. They didn't know that she was waiting for them. As one of the men reached the barn door and began to pry it open, Sarah's training took over. She aimed carefully, keeping her breathing steady. With a quiet but powerful shot, she fired a bullet that hit the door's lock, causing it to snap and the door to swing open with a loud creak. The men froze, looking toward the sound. Sarah's next shot shattered a nearby lantern, sending sparks flying into the dark. Panic flashed across the men's faces. They had expected an easy break-in, but were met with precise and deadly resistance. Without hesitation, Sarah fired again, this time hitting the engine of their vehicle parked near the trees. The engine sputtered and died. The men shouted to each other, trying to regroup, but Sarah was already moving. She slipped out from behind the window and ran quietly to a hidden spot near the tree line. From there she had a clear view of the whole area. The outlaws were now confused and angry. One of them shouted, "Who the hell is out here? Show yourself!" Sarah didn't answer. She stayed hidden and waited for the right moment. Her military training had taught her patience and precision, and she was not about to waste her advantage. The outlaws began to spread out, searching for her. One of them walked toward a small shed nearby, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Sarah held her breath. When he was close enough, she fired a warning shot that hit a tree just above his head. The man jumped back, yelling to his companions. Realizing they were being hunted, the outlaws gathered quickly and decided to retreat. They moved toward their vehicle, but Sarah's traps slowed them down. One man stepped on a tripwire she had set, causing a loud bang that echoed through the night. Another triggered a wire that made cans and old metal objects clatter loudly. The outlaws cursed and shouted, but they had no choice but to run. Sarah fired a few more warning shots, making sure they didn't get too close. The leader, the man, with the scar on his cheek, turned and shouted orders to keep moving. Sarah watched as they disappeared into the woods, their figures swallowed by the darkness. Her body relaxed slightly, but she knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, Sarah walked through the damage left behind. The broken fence posts, the footprints, and the marks on the barn told the story of the night's confrontation. She carefully checked each trap, making repairs where needed, and thinking about how to improve her defenses. She knew the outlaws would come back, and she would have to be ready. But she also felt a new confidence. For the first time in weeks, she realized that she was not just defending a farm, she was fighting for her family's survival. Later that day, Sarah took Jamie out to the fields for some fresh air. Jamie was full of questions about the noises and the men she had told him about in vague terms. Sarah answered as honestly as she could without frightening him. "Mom, are those bad men going to come back?" Jamie asked, his eyes wide. Sarah knelt down to look into his face. "I don't know for sure, Jamie, but I promise you, I will always keep you safe, no matter what happens." Jamie nodded, trusting her words. Sarah felt a deep love and determination well up inside her. She wasn't just a mother. She was a warrior now, protecting the person she loved most. As the days went on, Sarah prepared for the next attack. She studied the land, planning ambush points and escape routes. She checked her weapons, making sure everything was ready. She practiced moving silently and watching for signs of the enemy. The outlaws did not waste time. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink and orange, Sarah saw a group of figures moving through the woods again. This time, they were larger in number, 5 men instead of 3, and better armed. Sarah stayed calm. She knew she could not let them get close to the farmhouse or her son. She positioned herself in a hidden spot overlooking the path they were taking, rifle in hand and eyes sharp. As the men approached, Sarah fired a shot that struck the ground near their leader's feet. The men stopped, looking around for the source. She fired again, this time hitting a tree branch that fell with a loud crack. The outlaws began to spread out, searching, but Sarah was ready. She moved silently through the underbrush, keeping out of sight but staying close. She used every skill she had to track their movements and predict their next steps. Suddenly, one of the men spotted her hiding place and shouted. The outlaws turned and started moving toward her position. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired quickly, disabling 2 of the men before they could reach her. The remaining outlaws tried to retreat, but Sarah was faster. She chased them through the woods, setting off more traps and shooting warning shots to keep them off balance. The fight was over quickly. The outlaws fled, injured and defeated. Sarah returned to the farm, exhausted but victorious. That night, Sarah sat by the fireplace thinking about what had happened. She knew this was only the beginning of a long struggle. But she also knew she had what it took to protect her home and her son. Jamie woke up and came to sit beside her, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, are the bad men gone now?" Sarah smiled and hugged him close. "For now, Jamie. But no matter what, I will always be here to keep you safe." And with that promise, Sarah felt stronger than ever. She was ready for whatever came next. The days after the first real fight were tense but quiet. Sarah knew the outlaws were not finished. They were regrouping, planning a bigger and more dangerous attack. She could feel it in the air. The wind seemed colder, the nights longer, and the shadows deeper. Sarah didn't waste any time. She prepared her farm for the final battle she knew was coming. She repaired the fences again, making them stronger and harder to break. She moved her traps into better positions, places where the outlaws were most likely to pass. She built hidden pits covered with branches and leaves, ready to catch anyone careless enough to fall in. She worked harder than ever before, pushing her body to the limit, but never showing weakness to Jamie. She wanted him to feel safe and hopeful, not scared. So during the day, she played with him, taught him how to care for the animals, and read stories to him by the fire. At night, when Jamie was asleep, Sarah sat by the window watching the dark woods. She saw the flicker of firelight deep in the trees, the outlaws' camp. She knew their leader, the man with the scar on his cheek, was there, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Sarah had learned one thing from her time in the army. Knowledge was power. She studied every detail about the outlaws' movements. She marked their patrols, counted their numbers, and planned her response carefully. She wasn't just defending a farm now, she was preparing for war. The night before the final confrontation, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She knew this fight could change everything. If she lost, the farm and her son's safety would be gone. If she won, she would prove to herself and the world that she was still strong no matter the odds. She packed her supplies, checking her weapons one last time. She made sure Jamie's emergency bag was ready with food, water, and warm clothes. She whispered a promise to him, "I will protect you, always." When the first light of dawn touched the sky, Sarah was already waiting. She moved silently through the fields, her rifle ready, her senses sharp. The outlaws came like a storm, menacing, loud, and confident they would take what they wanted. But Sarah was ready. She used the terrain to her advantage, hiding in the tall grass and behind trees. One by one, she picked off the outlaws with careful, precise shots. Her aim was deadly, and her movements quick and silent. The leader of the outlaws realized they were being hunted. He tried to rally his men, shouting orders to attack together. But Sarah's traps slowed them down. Some men fell into hidden pits. Others were caught in nets and wires she had set. The battle moved closer to the farmhouse. Sarah knew she had to protect Jamie at all costs. She sent him to a secret safe room she had prepared, a small cellar beneath the house with a strong door and supplies. Jamie was scared, but he trusted his mother. As the outlaws reached the farmhouse, Sarah stood her ground. The leader charged at her, weapon in hand, angry and desperate. Sarah met him with calm determination. They fought fiercely, a struggle of strength and skill. Sarah's military training gave her the edge. She dodged his blows and used his own momentum against him. With a final move, she disarmed him and forced him to surrender. The other outlaws, seeing their leader defeated, gave up and ran into the woods. The farmhouse was safe. The outlaws had been defeated. Sarah went down to the safe room and hugged Jamie tightly. Tears of relief and happiness filled her eyes. They had survived the night and won the fight. The next morning, the sheriff and deputies arrived. Sarah told them everything about the outlaws, the attacks, and how she had defended her home. The sheriff was impressed by her bravery and skill. The story spread quickly in the town. People who had seen Sarah as just a quiet, single mother now saw her as a hero, a woman who protected her family and her farm with courage and strength. Sarah knew the fight had changed her. She was no longer just a woman hiding her past. She was a protector, a fighter, and a mother who would never back down. Her farm returned to peace, but Sarah remained ready. She watched the horizon with clear eyes, knowing that she had the power to face whatever came next. And most of all, she knew one thing for sure. She would always protect Jamie, no matter what. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting golden light across the battered farmhouse. Smoke still drifted from a few small fires, and the land bore the signs of a long and dangerous fight. The fields were trampled, the barn was damaged, and the fences had been torn down again. But the silence was peaceful, and the danger was finally gone. Sarah stood at the edge of her porch, looking over the land she had fought so hard to protect. Her hands were scraped, her body ached, and there were deep bruises across her arms and ribs. But none of it mattered now. She had done what many thought was impossible. She had faced a group of armed criminals and sent them running. And most importantly, she had kept her son safe. Jamie came outside, still in his pajamas, his small feet crunching softly over the dry grass. He looked at his mother with wide eyes. "Is it over, Mama?" Sarah turned to him, kneeling to meet his gaze. She brushed the hair from his forehead and nodded slowly. "Yes, baby. It's over." Jamie wrapped his arms around her neck, and Sarah closed her eyes, holding him tightly. That moment, more than all the battles and all the training, was what she had been fighting for. Not just the land, not just her pride, but that quiet hug from the little boy who needed her more than anything else in the world. Later that morning, the sheriff returned with more deputies. They brought trucks, supplies, and even a few volunteers from the town who had heard what Sarah had done. Everyone was curious. Many people had doubted her before. They had seen her as a single mother living alone, someone who kept to herself. Few had known she was a former Green Beret sniper. Fewer still believed that she could stand alone against a group of outlaws. But now, everyone knew the truth. The sheriff walked up to Sarah and tipped his hat. "You saved a lot more than your farm last night," he said. "You scared them. Word spreading fast. They won't come back." Sarah nodded, tired but calm. "I hope you're right," she replied. "But I'll still be ready if they do." As the deputies helped clean up the area, Jamie sat near the porch, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Some of the townspeople brought warm food, tools, and supplies to help repair the damage. One older woman gave Sarah a hug and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Sarah was surprised by the kindness. For years she had kept her distance, thinking it was safer that way. She didn't want pity or unwanted attention. But now something had changed. These people weren't looking at her with judgment. They were looking at her with respect. Over the next few days, Sarah worked harder than ever. The barn needed repairs, the broken windows had to be replaced, and some of the traps had to be removed. Jamie helped where he could, carrying tools and holding nails, always close by his mother's side. At night, the fear was still there, hiding deep inside. Sarah had nightmares, memories of war, of gunfire, of people she had lost. She would wake up in a sweat, holding her breath, checking the house for danger. But every time she saw Jamie's peaceful sleeping face, she reminded herself, they were safe now. One afternoon, a young journalist came to visit the farm. She had heard the story and wanted to write about Sarah for the local newspaper. Sarah hesitated at first. She didn't like attention. She didn't want to be called a hero. But the journalist said something that changed her mind. "Other women need to hear your story," she said. "You showed that strength doesn't just come from muscles or guns. It comes from love, and from not giving up." Sarah thought about that. She looked at Jamie playing in the dirt with a toy tractor, laughing and carefree. Maybe the story could help others. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. So she sat down and told the journalist everything. Her time in the army, the decision to leave that life behind, the years of raising Jamie alone, and the long nights defending their home. She didn't make herself sound perfect. She spoke about fear, about doubts, about pain. But she also spoke about hope, and courage, and love. When the article was published a week later, it spread quickly. People from nearby towns began to send letters of support. A few even drove to the farm just to thank her in person. One woman cried and said, "You reminded me what we're all capable of." Sarah accepted the attention quietly. She didn't want fame, but she welcomed the kindness. It felt good to know that her story meant something to others. As weeks passed, the farm began to look normal again. The fields were green, the animals were healthy, and the fences were strong. Jamie started laughing more. He had been having nightmares too, but they were becoming less frequent. He told his mom, "I feel safe again." Sarah knew the danger was gone, but she didn't stop training. She still woke up early, still checked the perimeter, and still cleaned her weapons. But it wasn't out of fear anymore. It was habit, discipline, and preparation. She even began teaching Jamie small lessons, not how to fight, but how to stay aware, how to move quietly, how to stay calm in hard moments. Jamie was curious, and Sarah answered his questions honestly. She didn't want to raise him in fear, but she wanted him to grow up strong, like her. One day, as they were planting new vegetables in the garden, Jamie asked, "Will there ever be more bad guys?" Sarah paused, digging her fingers into the soil. "Maybe," she said gently. "There are always some people who want to take what isn't theirs, but as long as we stay smart and stay together, we'll be okay." Jamie nodded, satisfied. He planted his seed and smiled. "Then I'll protect you too." Sarah smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "You already do, sweetheart." In the months that followed, Sarah's life began to feel normal again, but not the quiet, lonely normal from before. This time, there was connection, purpose, and even new friendships. She accepted help from neighbors, and she helped them in return. She started going into town more often, sometimes just for a cup of coffee or to pick up supplies. One local school teacher asked her to come speak to a group of students about courage and responsibility. Sarah was nervous, but Jamie pushed her gently. "You tell me stories all the time. You can tell them too." So she did, and the students listened, wide-eyed and silent. Some of them had never heard a story like hers. Afterward, one girl said, "I didn't know someone like me could be strong like you." Sarah put her hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "You can. You just have to believe it, and never stop fighting for what matters."